Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Neon signs flickered in the twilight, casting an otherworldly glow on the faces of strangers hurrying past. Xander clutched his suitcase tighter, feeling the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a lead blanket. A honking taxi jolted him out of his reverie.
Hey, buddy, you gonna stand there all night or what?
Xander blinked, realizing he'd been blocking the sidewalk. He mumbled an apology and shuffled towards the nearest alley, desperate for a moment of quiet to gather his thoughts. The argument with his parents echoed in his mind, a cacophony of disappointment and frustration. Their words had cut deep, reopening old wounds he'd tried so hard to ignore.
When are you going to grow up, Xander?
His father's voice, gruff and impatient.
It's time to settle down, find a nice girl, start a family. That's what men do.
His mother's softer tones, somehow even more painful.
We just want what's best for you, sweetheart. Don't you want to be happy?
Happy. The word tasted bitter on his tongue. He'd spent his entire life trying to fit into the mold they'd created for him. And where had it gotten him? A soul-crushing job, a string of failed relationships, and a gnawing emptiness that threatened to consume him. No more. He was done living someone else's life. Xander took a deep breath, inhaling the scents of the city. Exhaust fumes, greasy food, and something indefinable that whispered of possibility. He squared his shoulders and stepped back onto the sidewalk, this time with purpose. The first order of business was finding a place to stay. He'd done his research before leaving, scouring online forums for recommendations on cheap, no-questions-asked accommodations. It wasn't long before he found himself standing in front of a rundown motel, its vacancy sign flickering weakly in the growing darkness. The lobby was dingy, lit by a single bare bulb that cast more shadows than light. A bored-looking clerk barely glanced up from his magazine as Xander approached the desk.
Room for one,
Xander said, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again, pitching his voice a bit higher.
Just for a few nights.
The clerk grunted, sliding a key across the scratched Formica surface. Cash only. No refunds. Xander nodded, handing over a wad of bills. He'd withdrawn as much as he could before leaving, knowing that using his cards would leave a trail. The less connection to his old life, the better. The room was about what he'd expected. Threadbare carpet, a sagging mattress, and a bathroom that had seen better days. But it was a start, a blank slate on which to build his new life. Xander set his suitcase on the bed and unzipped it with trembling fingers. Nestled among his clothes was a small makeup bag, purchased in secret weeks ago. He'd spent hours watching tutorials online, practicing in the dead of night when his roommate was away. He pulled out a foundation that matched his skin tone, applying it carefully. Next came the contouring, softening the angles of his face. Eyeshadow, mascara, a swipe of lipstick. With each step, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The wig was last, a cascade of chestnut waves that fell past his shoulders. He'd chosen it carefully, wanting something that looked natural but still different enough from his own hair to complete the transformation. Xandra now, stood back and looked in the mirror. The face that stared back was both familiar and strange, like seeing a long-lost twin for the first time. She touched her cheek, marveling at the smoothness. "Hello, Xandra," she whispered, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was truly seeing herself. The next morning brought a new set of challenges. Xandra had packed carefully, selecting clothes that would help her blend in as a woman, but actually wearing them in public was another matter entirely. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting and readjusting her outfit. The blouse clung to her chest in a way that made her hyper-aware of the silicone forms she'd carefully positioned in her bra. The skirt felt simultaneously too short and too long, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone would be able to tell she wasn't used to walking in heels. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "One step at a time." Xandra took a deep breath and stepped out of the motel room. The sunlight felt different on her skin somehow, as if the very air around her had changed. She made her way down the street, each click of her heels on the pavement a small victory. Her first stop was a coffee shop she'd spotted the night before. As she waited in line, she couldn't help but notice the looks she was getting. Not the suspicious or judgmental stares she'd feared, but casual glances that slid right past her. She was just another face in the crowd.
"What can I get for you, miss?"
The barista's voice snapped her out of her reverie. "Oh, just a latte, please," Xandra said, her voice higher and softer than she was used to. She'd been practicing, but it still felt strange.
"Name for the order?"
For a moment, Xandra froze. It was such a simple question, but it felt monumental. This was it. The first time she'd introduce herself to the world as Xandra. "Xandra," she said, and the name felt right on her lips. As she waited for her drink, Xandra's eyes were drawn to a help wanted sign in the window of a nearby boutique. She'd need to find work soon. Her savings wouldn't last forever. The thought of a job interview in her new identity was terrifying, but she knew she couldn't put it off. Latte in hand, Xandra made her way to the boutique. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and she was immediately enveloped in the scent of perfume and new fabric. "Welcome to Bella's boutique," a cheerful voice called out. "Let me know if you need any help." Xandra looked up to see a woman about her age, impeccably dressed and sporting a name tag that read Mia. "Actually," Xandra said, her heart pounding, "I was wondering about the job opening." Mia's face lit up. "Oh, fantastic! We've been short-staffed for ages. Do you have any retail experience?" Xandra hesitated. She'd worked in retail during college, but that had been years ago, and as Xander. "Some," she said cautiously. "It's been a while, though." "That's okay," Mia assured her. "What's most important is having an eye for fashion and being good with people. Why don't you tell me a bit about yourself?" And so Xandra found herself spinning a carefully crafted story. One that was close enough to the truth to be believable, but with key details changed. She was new in town, looking for a fresh start. She loved fashion and helping people feel confident in their own skin. As she spoke, Xandra felt herself relaxing. The words came more easily, and she found herself gesturing naturally, her movements more fluid and feminine. Mia listened attentively, nodding and smiling. When Xandra finished, she clapped her hands together. "Well, Xandra, I think you'd be a great fit here. When can you start?" Xandra blinked, taken aback by how easy it had been. "Really? I mean, don't you need to check references or—" Mia waved her hand dismissively. "I trust my instincts, and I have a good feeling about you. Besides, we're desperate for help. How about you come in tomorrow for a trial run?" "That would be wonderful," Xandra said, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "Thank you so much." As she left the boutique, Xandra felt a surge of confidence. She'd done it. She'd secured a job, her first step towards building a new life. The city suddenly seemed less overwhelming, full of possibility rather than danger. Over the next few weeks, Xandra threw herself into her new role at Bella's boutique. Each day brought new challenges and small victories. She learned to navigate the intricacies of women's fashion, from the difference between an A-line and an empire waist to the subtle art of accessorizing. More importantly, she found herself connecting with the customers in a way she never had before. There was something about helping someone find the perfect outfit that brought out a side of her she hadn't known existed, patient, empathetic, with an intuitive understanding of how to make people feel good about themselves. "You have such a gift," Mia told her one day as they were closing up shop. "The way you handled Mrs. Thompson earlier, I've never seen anyone calm her down so quickly." Xandra blushed, remembering the fussy older woman who'd come in looking for the perfect outfit for her granddaughter's wedding. "I just listened to what she was really saying. She wasn't upset about the dresses. She was worried about looking out of place at a young person's event." Mia nodded approvingly. "Exactly. You see people, Xandra. It's a rare quality." As the days turned into weeks, Xandra found herself settling into a routine. She'd wake up early, take extra care with her makeup and outfit, and head to work. In the evenings, she'd explore her new neighborhood, slowly building a mental map of her new world. One evening, as she was walking home from work, she passed a small LGBT community center. A poster in the window caught her eye. It was advertising a support group for transgender individuals. Xandra felt a flutter in her stomach. She'd been so focused on building her new life that she hadn't really stopped to examine what her transformation meant. Was she transgender? The word felt both thrilling and terrifying. She'd started this journey as a means of escape, but somewhere along the way, it had become so much more. The thought of going back to living as Xander made her feel physically ill. Before she could talk herself out of it, Xandra pushed open the door of the community center. The woman at the front desk looked up with a warm smile. "Can I help you?" Xandra took a deep breath. "I saw the poster for the support group." The woman's smile widened. "First time? Don't worry, everyone's nervous at first. The group meets in the room down the hall. They should be starting in about 10 minutes if you want to join." Xandra nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you." As she made her way down the hall, Xandra felt a mix of anticipation and fear. What if they could tell she wasn't really trans? What if they rejected her? But as she stepped into the room, those fears began to melt away. The faces that turned to greet her were kind, understanding. She saw her own uncertainty reflected in their eyes, but also strength and resilience. "Welcome," said a tall woman with close-cropped hair. "I'm Jasmine, the group facilitator. Why don't you grab a seat? We're just about to start." Xandra sat down, smoothing her skirt nervously. As the meeting began, she found herself hanging on every word. People shared their stories of coming out, of transitioning, of finding acceptance and facing rejection. With each tale, Xandra felt a growing sense of recognition. When it came her turn to speak, Xandra hesitated. Should she tell the truth about how this had started as an escape, but had become so much more? In the end, she decided on a version of the truth. "I'm Xandra," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been living as a woman for a few weeks now, and it feels right, but I'm still figuring things out. I'm not sure where this journey is going to take me." The group nodded encouragingly. Jasmine leaned forward. "That's okay, Xandra. There's no one right way to be trans. Some people know from childhood. Others figure it out later in life. What matters is that you're being true to yourself. As the meeting wrapped up, Xandra felt a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. She exchanged numbers with a few of the other members, promising to meet up for coffee. On her walk home, Xandra's mind was buzzing with new information and possibilities. She'd learned about hormone therapy, about legal name changes, about the myriad ways people expressed their gender identity. It was overwhelming, but also exhilarating. For the first time, Xandra allowed herself to truly consider a future as a woman, not just as a temporary escape, but as her authentic self. The thought brought both excitement and fear. What would it mean for her relationship with her family, for her future romantic prospects, for her career? As she unlocked the door to her apartment, she'd moved out of the motel a week ago. Xandra caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. The person looking back at her was more confident, more at ease than she'd ever been as Xander. "This is who I am," she whispered to her reflection. "This is who I've always been." The realization brought tears to her eyes, but they were tears of relief, of finally understanding a truth that had been buried deep inside her for years. The next morning, Xandra woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. She'd made a decision. She was going to fully embrace her identity as a woman. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was on the right path. As she got ready for work, Xandra took extra care with her appearance. She chose a floral wrap dress that accentuated her figure, pairing it with delicate gold jewelry and low heels. Her makeup was subtle but polished, enhancing her features without looking overdone. At the boutique, Mia noticed the change immediately. "You're glowing today, Xandra. Did something happen?" Xandra smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her whole face. "I just made a decision about who I want to be." Mia nodded, seeming to understand more than Xandra had said. "Well, whatever it is, it suits you." Throughout the day, Xandra found herself more confident in her interactions with customers. She moved with a grace she hadn't possessed before, her voice steady and sure as she offered advice and suggestions. During her lunch break, Xandra made a call she'd been putting off for weeks. Her hands shook as she dialed the number, but she knew it was time. "Hello?" Her mother's voice, familiar and distant all at once. "Mom," Xandra said, her voice catching. "It's me. Xandra." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When her mother spoke again, her voice was tight with emotion. "Xander? What do you mean, Xandra?" Xandra took a deep breath. "Mom, I have something important to tell you. I'm transgender. I've been living as a woman, and it feels right. It feels like who I've always been meant to be." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Xandra could hear her mother's shaky breathing, could almost see her struggling to process this information. I don't understand," her mother finally said. "Is this because of the fight? Xander, if you're doing this to punish us—" "No, Mom," Xandra interrupted gently. "This isn't about you or Dad. It's about me, about finally being honest with myself and the world." Another long pause. "I need time to process this," her mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your father, I don't know how he'll react." Xandra nodded, even though her mother couldn't see her. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I needed you to know." After they hung up, Xandra sat in silence for a moment, letting the emotions wash over her. It wasn't the reaction she'd hoped for, but it wasn't the outright rejection she'd feared either. It was a start. When she returned to work, Mia could tell something was wrong. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Xandra managed a small smile. "Just family stuff. It's complicated." Mia squeezed her shoulder sympathetically. "Family always is. Listen, why don't you take off early today? You've been working so hard, you deserve a break." Grateful for the kindness, Xandra accepted the offer. As she left the boutique, she decided to treat herself to a bit of retail therapy. She'd been saving most of her paychecks, living frugally as she built her new life, but today felt like a day for indulgence. She wandered into a high-end department store, running her hands over silky fabrics and luxurious knits. A saleswoman approached, offering assistance. "I'm looking for something special," Xandra said. "Something that makes me feel powerful." The saleswoman nodded knowingly. "I have just the thing." She led Xandra to a rack of sleek, tailored suits. Xandra's eyes widened. She'd always admired women in suits, the way they exuded confidence and authority. "Try this one," the saleswoman suggested, holding up a deep burgundy suit with slim-cut trousers and a fitted jacket. In the dressing room, Xandra slipped on the suit, marveling at how it hugged her curves while still maintaining a sharp, professional silhouette. She stepped out to look in the full-length mirror and gasped. The woman staring back at her was poised, elegant, and unmistakably feminine. But there was also strength there, a quiet power that radiated from within. "It's perfect," Xandra breathed. The suit was far more expensive than anything she'd bought for herself before, but as she handed over her credit card, Xandra knew it was worth it. This wasn't just a piece of clothing, it was an investment in her future, in the woman she was becoming. As she walked home, suit bag draped over her arm, Xandra felt a renewed sense of purpose. The conversation with her mother had been difficult, but it was a necessary step. She was done hiding, done pretending to be someone she wasn't. Tomorrow, she decided, she would wear her new suit to work. It was time to have a conversation with Mia, to be fully honest about who she was and where she'd come from. It was a risk, but Xandra was ready to face whatever consequences might come. That night, as she hung the suit in her closet, Xandra caught sight of herself in the mirror. She studied her reflection, taking in the soft curves of her face, the length of her hair, the graceful line of her neck. "This is me," she said softly. "This is who I've always been." And for the first time in her life, Xandra felt truly, completely at home in her own skin. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was acknowledging the significance of the day. Xandra woke early, her stomach a knot of anticipation and nerves. Today was the day she would fully step into her truth, no more hiding or half-truths. She took her time getting ready, savoring each step of her morning routine. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was calm and determined, a far cry from the confused and conflicted person she'd been just a few short weeks ago. The burgundy suit fit like a dream, the fabric smooth and cool against her skin. Xandra paired it with a crisp white blouse and low heels, her makeup understated but flawless. As she fastened a delicate gold necklace around her throat, she felt like a warrior donning armor for battle. The walk to Bella's boutique felt different that morning. Xandra held her head high, meeting the eyes of passers-by with a confidence she'd never possessed before. A few people even smiled at her, nodding in appreciation of her polished appearance. As she pushed open the door of the boutique, the familiar chime of the bell seemed to ring with added significance. Mia looked up from where she was arranging a display, her eyes widening as she took in Xandra's appearance. "Wow," Mia breathed. "You look incredible, Xandra. Special occasion?" Xandra took a deep breath. "Actually, Mia, I was hoping we could talk. There's something important I need to tell you." Concern flickered across Mia's face, but she nodded. "Of course. Why don't we go to the back office?" As they settled into the small, cluttered space that served as the boutique's office, Xandra felt her heart racing. This was it, the moment of truth. "Mia," she began, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "I haven't been entirely honest with you. When I applied for this job, I was in a transition period, not just moving to a new city, but becoming who I truly am." Mia listened intently, her expression open and encouraging. Xandra continued, the words tumbling out now that she'd started. "I'm transgender, Mia. When I came here, I was just beginning to live as my true self. I was scared and unsure, and I didn't know how to explain it all. But working here, being Xandra every day, it's helped me realize that this is who I've always been meant to be." There was a moment of silence after Xandra finished speaking. She held her breath, bracing herself for Mia's reaction. To her surprise, Mia reached out and took her hand. "Xandra," she said softly, "thank you for trusting me with this. I had my suspicions, you know. There was always something about you, a kind of blossoming, like you were growing into yourself more each day." Tears pricked at Xandra's eyes. "You're not upset that I wasn't completely honest?" Mia shook her head firmly. "Honey, you were honest in all the ways that matter. You've been an incredible asset to this store, and more importantly, you've become a dear friend. Your journey is your own, and I'm honored that you've chosen to share it with me." The relief that washed over Xandra was so intense, it was almost physical. She hadn't realized how much tension she'd been carrying until it suddenly lifted. "There is one thing, though," Mia said, a mischievous glint in her eye. "That suit is far too fabulous for restocking shelves. I think it's time we talked about promoting you to assistant manager. What do you say?" Xandra laughed through her tears, a sound of pure joy and relief. "I'd say that sounds perfect." The rest of the day passed in a blur of excitement and congratulations. Word of Xandra's promotion spread quickly among the regular customers, many of whom stopped by to offer their well wishes. As she was helping a young woman find the perfect outfit for a job interview, Xandra felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see an older woman, elegantly dressed and radiating a quiet dignity. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice low and conspiratorial. "I couldn't help but overhear earlier about your promotion and the other thing." Xandra felt a flicker of apprehension, but she met the woman's gaze steadily. "Yes?" The woman's face softened into a smile. "I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you, dear. It takes tremendous courage to be true to yourself in a world that often doesn't understand. My son is transgender, you see. Watching him become the man he was always meant to be has been the greatest joy of my life." Xandra felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you," she managed to say. "That means more than you know." The woman patted her arm gently. You keep shining, dear. The world needs more light like yours. As the woman left the store, Xandra felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just living this life for herself anymore. She was part of a larger community, a beacon of hope for others who might be struggling with their own identities. That evening, as she locked up the boutique, Xandra felt a sense of contentment she'd never known before. She had a job she loved, friends who accepted her for who she was, and a future full of possibilities. As she walked home, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Xandra tilted her face up, basking in the warm light. For the first time in her life, she felt truly, completely free. She knew there would be challenges ahead. Her relationship with her family was still uncertain, and there would always be people who didn't understand or accept her. But standing there in the fading light, Xandra knew she had the strength to face whatever came her way. She was Xandra now, fully and completely, and she was ready to embrace every moment of her new life.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!